Trapped games. Mega Man. 1 through 4 for the Game Boy. I talked about Mega Man 5 for the Game Boy already. I felt it deserved its own video because it was a wholly original game. But 1 through 4 on the Game Boy are highly derivative of the NES Mega Man games. Each one of these takes 4 Robot Masters from one game, and 4 Robot Masters from the next game in the series. Each of them also breaks them down into 2 groups, so you cannot choose from the full 8 in any of these games at any given time. You are given 2 groups of 4 in succession. It's also worth noting that none of the levels in the Game Boy games are one-to-one conversions of the levels from the NES series. Some of them are wildly different, while others are very similar, though all of them will have elements from the original NES levels. Many of the elements you'll notice will be shrunk down, at least somewhat, as the screen on an original Game Boy was fairly small. It's also interesting playing through at least tributes to levels and fighting bosses with abilities you would not have had in the original NES games, such as having the slide available to you in Mega Man 2, or when you're fighting bosses from Mega Man 3 and you have the ability to charge your Mega Buster. This can lead to encounters feeling very different from their original incarnations. Also, since each game has a different mix of bosses, the rock, paper, scissors game you play with boss powers is going to be different from what you remember in the NES games. And sometimes it can be downright counterintuitive. Although not everything in these games is derivative, you will encounter original bosses, specifically when doing the Wily stages in these games. And it's worth noting that Mega Man 4 on the Game Boy was the first Mega Man game to feature a shop mechanic, which honestly is something Mega Man games should have gotten before that point. But these games have a lot to offer. If you've played through the NES Mega Man games 1,000 times, give these a shot, because they're a remix of what you remember. And these certainly don't deserve to be forgotten, because the last place you could buy these was on the 3DS eShop, but it's closed. And while Switch Online has started adding original Game Boy titles, thus far, none of the Mega Man titles have shown up on there. And once upon a time, there was a collection of these games scheduled for release on the Game Boy Advance. Sadly, that was cancelled, and the idea has never really come up again. And while looking into why that game was cancelled, there were a bunch of people talking about the source code being lost for the games. But then when I tried to look into that, I couldn't actually find any official statement about that. So that seems to be just internet myth. So I'm just suggesting that maybe it's time for these games to get a legacy collection of their own, like how most other Mega Man games have gotten them at this point. And it doesn't necessarily need to stop with just the Game Boy games. Both the Game Gear and the Wonder Swan had Mega Man games on them, and both are long overdue for some attention. So how about it, Capcom? I bet you have at least one more Mega Man Legacy collection in ya. Or are you done milking this super fighting robot? Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.